I knew when I left law to open this that it wasn't just to open a restaurant. You know, it was a purpose and passion driven endeavor for me. And I wanted to create a concept, a restaurant idea, a restaurant concept that would change what I saw in the market at the time, you know, and I wanted to do something that was going to be scalable, that was going to be something that I could launch, you know, across the country. I wanted to create a national brand.
All right, guys. Today I'm with Denise Tran, the founder and CEO of Bun Mee. Denise is the visionary founder and CEO of Bun Mee, a fast casual Vietnamese sandwich brand born from her personal journey and bold career shift from law to food entrepreneurship. After the passing of her father and transformative trip to Vietnam, Denise was inspired to bring the vibrant flavors of banh mi to the American mainstream. Since opening her first banh mi in San Francisco in 2011, she's grown the concept into a beloved brand with multiple locations and a new national franchising program, all while championing authenticity, culture, and craveability. Craveability is big. That's the big one. Denise was just named one of Fast Casual's top 25 executives in the country for 2025, and Bun Mee was named one of the Fast Casual's top 100 movers and shakers for 2025. Bloomberg recently highlighted Bun Mee as one of the top global airport restaurants in the world for business travelers, and you guys can get involved now too. Bun Mee is now franchising nationwide, aiming to expand beyond the Bay Area as a pioneer in Vietnamese sandwich category. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks
Quite the introduction there. So I have to say that I have long thought that the banh mi sandwich is one of those things that I didn't understand how it never really took hold in this country. When I had one, I felt like a lot of people owed me an apology as to why they didn't introduce me to this sandwich. I didn't find out about it until I was about 28 years old. So
yeah,
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you had said that Bun Mee was born from a very personal place. I'm a big fan of origin stories. I'd love to hear about that story and what it means to you as you kind of take this step into franchising.
Yeah. A personal place. I mean, the context is, you know, I am an immigrant, came to this country, grew up in New Orleans. And growing up for me, this is like in the 80s in New Orleans. I was the only Vietnamese, only Asian in my entire school. I grew up always feeling like my food just, you know, wasn't accepted. I would go to, I think this is the story of so many immigrants. I'd come to school, my mom would pack me a lunch, and I would be embarrassed to open it up or even eat it with everyone because it's not a ham and cheese. It's not a, you know, a grilled cheese sandwich. I was like, can I just have American food? Like it just always felt like it accentuated my otherness. Right. And all I wanted was just to assimilate. I wanted to be like everyone else. So fast forward, so that was growing up. That was kind of how I felt growing up. And then fast forward, you know, I'm practicing law. This is 2007. I'm living in New York City. I find out my dad is passing away. He had months to live. And I'm so close to my dad. And his last wish to me was to take his ashes back to Vietnam. And I decide, you know what? I grew up in the States. I feel very American. This is the country that my dad loves and would like to, you know, end up there. And so I bring his ashes back, and I'm having this trip. I wanted to go by myself. And I had this like trip of, you know, I decided I'm going to travel from Saigon to Hanoi. I got on a train, a bus, a motorbike, you know, anyone that would take me. And along the way, I'm eating street food there, right? And through the street food and the stories, I'm connecting to my dad, I'm connecting to my homeland, my culture, and I'm having this newfound appreciation for my identity, my culture that I just growing up didn't have. And so from that experience is kind of what started the idea to do this. I was practicing law, studying for the New York bar because I moved from Seattle and I just got engaged. So much was happening. And I'm starting for New York bar. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm in my early 30s. And I was like, I want to do something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
I want to figure out what that is. And I didn't want to practice law. And I decided that's kind of how Bun Mee germinated for me. It was just, I just realized that this was my path. And I wanted to bring a food that I grew up eating, but it was just hiding and being
Yeah.
embarrassed about it. And really wanting to bring the food that I love, the stories that I learned, the culture that I felt reconnected to
Yeah.
into American mainstream.
That's really cool. I can relate somewhat to that story because my wife is Colombian. She's born here in the States, but her parents are from Colombia, didn't know a lot about American culture when they came here. And she's 46 and I'm 48. So about that time in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't that cool to be a Latina girl.
Wow.
And she would tell everybody that she was Italian because she felt bad, like what she had for lunch. So, but that's all changed. So
Yeah.
she's embraced her full culture now. But that's, yeah, I can relate to that dynamic a bit.
And isn't it a great thing that it's
Oh,
changing?
I love it. Oh, I mean, so many different. I mean, that's the thing, and I think that's why this country's food scene is so fantastic because it's everything, right? You know, we
Yeah.
go to one country, we get basically what they have. But I'm interested in the stepping away from the legal stuff because I stepped away from Wall Street after 9/11 to go into the restaurant business. So what was that? Was it just like ripping off a band-aid, or were you kind of like, maybe I'm not doing the right thing? Where was your head at?
Yeah, it was a difficult decision to decide to do it. Obviously, I had to convince my family. My mom was like, wait, you went to law school, we did all that, and now you're gonna
Yeah.
just change that and open a restaurant. So, I mean, I think it was a sell. I had to sell it to folks.
Yeah.
But I knew when I left law to open this that it wasn't just to open a restaurant.
Mm.
It was a purpose and passion driven endeavor for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to create a restaurant idea, a restaurant concept that would change what I saw in the market at the time, and I wanted to do something that was going to be scalable, that was going to be something that I could launch, across the country. I wanted to create a national brand because at the time, this is 2008 in New York, and the banh mi scene at the time was fragmented, mom and pop, no attention to customer service, design, decor. And folks, it wasn't part of even people's lunchtime lexicon. Like you had to go to
Right.
China, you had to know about it, you had to go seek it out. And it just wasn't part of mainstream America. It wasn't something that I saw on the street. I had to go seek it out, right?
Right.
And I wanted to change that, and so for me, it was a very easy change for me mentally. But I think for the people around me, who didn't see the vision at the time, it felt like I was crazy. And it was kind of like, what are you doing? You got a great
Yeah.
job. You're making six figures. You went through law school. You did the whole thing. What are you doing? So,
Yeah.
it was sell, but I knew what I was out for. The vision was there. I just had to show it to people.
I mean, that's so textbook of what they say, right? Like you're going to come up with an idea, everyone's going to call you crazy, and then it's up to you if you want to push through that. I can relate. I think I made it down the elevator outside and call my dad and say, hey, I'm walking off of this job at Prudential Securities because I hate every second of it.
Yeah.
I've been, and I just gave up on it to go into restaurants. But yeah, for me, that the introduction to not just the sandwich, but Vietnamese food was not even nowhere close to being on my radar back then. I mean, it's having a real moment right now, I feel like. But you're talking about 2008. I mean, when you're creating something like this, how did you go about, I don't know if packaging is the right word, but how did you go about coming up with the idea of how can I make this more mainstream? Or did you just kind of, here's what it is, let's give it a shot? Like what were the steps you took to kind of bring this to life?
Yeah. So I'm, coming from law, I had no restaurant experience. I'm a home cook. I love to cook, but I definitely am not a chef. I don't know restaurant operations. And I knew that I wanted to create a scalable model, which is an
Hmm.
entirely different than just opening a restaurant. You really have to think about ingredients really well, how to use ingredients
Yeah.
properly. You have to also think about the ease of execution of everything because you have to train a lot of people. I mean, there's just a lot that goes into thinking about really creating a scalable concept versus a restaurant that you're going to work
Oh
in
yeah.
yourself.
Louder for the people in the back. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
They're two different models, right? And so for me, how did I go about it? I mean, one of the great things about the legal education is that I'm good at researching. I'm really good at researching. I did a lot, visited a lot of restaurants, talked to a lot of people. One of my key moves that I feel like I made that was instrumental to our success was I cold called a nationally known restaurant consulting firm in San Francisco. They do food R&D. They're a team of chefs, but
Hmm.
not only that, they're business minded. They know scalable concepts. I cold called them.
Nice.
And I was like, hey, I would like for you to work with me on my concept, because what I understand quickly is if you don't have the experience in your industry,
Mm.
you can bring it on. It shouldn't prevent you from doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
Right? You
Point.
yourself don't need that experience. You can hire it, you can bring them on. There's lots of ways to jumpstart that hurdle. It should not be an obstacle to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, I brought them on. I convinced them that this is going to be a concept that they're going to want to love, that they're going to want to be a part of. And luckily, they agreed, and they ended up working with me for Sweat Equity. And this was when I didn't have a location yet. I just had an idea. I just moved to
Wow.
San Francisco from New York. So I brought on this very reputable not seasonal, very reputable team that became part of my team. And so what I lacked in operational know-how and experience, they brought it on via Sweat Equity in my business.
Yeah.
And they became a partner. So that jump started me from, it was just an idea to now, we've got some seasoned people that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're gonna educate me. So that was one of my first moves in terms of, getting, I would say my major move that really catapulted us into a concept that people were going to look at. So that allowed me to get real estate that I
Mm.
probably wouldn't have gotten the kind of real estate I got. That allowed me to tap into the right brokers, the right, suppliers, all the right people in the industry that would have probably taken me an extra year or two to figure it out on my own through trial and error, right? I just was able to tap into the right team right away. So leveraging
Mm.
their know-how was so key to our success from day one.
That I feel like what you just said could be a whole episode on its own because that's the old school model for restaurants, right? Like you got to do everything, you got to wear 1,000 hats. But I saw something the other day that was like, Jeff Bezos owns like 13% of Amazon. This person owns like 3% of this billion-dollar company. Nobody gets there alone, right? That's what everybody says. But from this perspective, I think you had, Vietnamese food, for folks who don't know, has a lot of fats, a lot of flavors, a lot of herbs, a lot of acid, a lot of all sorts of different things. And when you bite into it, it's like, wow, I've never tasted this combination of things, which I would imagine behind the scenes, and maybe they mentioned this to you, that's a very chefy type thing. Like that is,
Very
yeah,
chefy.
this is like they would love to go out and have something of this. So I'm sure it wasn't that difficult of a sell. Am I right?
Yeah, I was so lucky because Aaron Novoshen, who
Oh
is now
yeah,
business partner, who
he was on
is
this show.
yeah.
Yeah,
He is a visionary in my opinion, and he knew when I was calling cold calling them. He just said that the idea is timely,
yeah,
and this was when again people couldn't pronounce Bun Mee.
Yeah.
But Aaron knew that the idea was timely, and he happened to love Bun Mee. So when I presented it in his office with his team, I think he was willing to take a risk on me. And he also knew that Vietnamese food is complex.
Yeah.
We're not just slicing deli meats and cutting tomatoes
Right.
and lettuce and putting mayo. Like
Right.
it is a complex food with lots of sauces, lots of things going on, braising. I mean, we were doing complex food in a sandwich, right?
Yeah.
So to Aaron, this is being a chef himself. He loves to take this on, right?
Oh yeah.
This is an exciting food that he wanted to take it on and wanted to take the challenge of like, hey, how am I going to work with Denise with her, her vision, her flavor profiles, her cuisine, and really make this scalable in the kitchen so that
Yeah.
anyone can easily execute without compromising on all these great flavors that Vietnamese food is known for. And
Yeah.
so it was the perfect partnership in my
Oh yeah.
mind.
I mean, you just happened to cold call like the Hall of Famer of concepts. I mean, that's like the Michael Jordan of testing concepts. So that's I don't know. I mean, you did say you were great at research, so obviously that's there you go.
Yes,
Something right there.
I shoot right.
Yeah, man, you are knocking on these doors, but that's what you have to do, and that's what like. I think so many people are in this emerging phase, which I kind of starting to hate to say that, but this infancy stage of these concepts think too small. They think they're not thinking big enough, and yeah, you go and knock on the door of Aaron Novashin, and you get his attention. Yeah, you got a good shot of making it work. So kudos to you. So it's interesting that you're at this point now, and you went from one unit to multiple to now franchising. What were like that's a different thing now, right? Now you're gonna be a franchisor. Like, what was it like, or what is it like? Maybe you're still doing it to package this up now for a system.
Right. So because I always knew that I wanted to scale, I was always focused on standardizing operations. That was a really important kind of fundamental approach that we took to our business. So
Mm-hmm.
luckily, with the support of Aaron's ops team, we kind of, it was already set in place when we started our restaurant. So, and continuing to fine tune those standardized operations, meaning like finding, a recipe that took maybe 20 steps and how do we get it
Mm-hmm.
down to 5 steps, and then standardizing that into a training manual so that, and taking pictures of every step. So we did that along the way the entire time, so that by the time that we were ready to franchise our model, it's really just taking all that information and putting it into our ops manual. So for us, streamlining the processes, using technology, using POS systems, and getting data, following KPIs that we had, knowing what sold, what didn't, just always being on top of knowing that information and standardizing everything that we did along the way made it much easier and an easier transition. I think that if you are a concept that is your goal, start doing it early when you've got one or two shops, because once you get to 5 or plus, it gets overwhelming, it gets unwieldy. And
Mm-hmm.
also, it's hard to just now, when you have a staff of 100 employees, to all of a sudden talk about standardization. It's
Yeah.
really hard to do, right? So for us, we invested in doing that in the very beginning, making video training, putting our training on video, just finding all these different ways to do that. Allowed us to be prepared for our place now and what we're doing now.
Yeah. Smart. Now, is there something that I mean, you took obviously a huge leap, but is there something that you think about now as like, especially working with this group, like now you're saying, wow, I wish I knew this beforehand. Like, is there anything that
Yeah,
comes to mind?
yeah. I mean, what did I wish that I knew beforehand? You mean before I even got into the restaurant business?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that I feel like I was prepared for how difficult it would be. I wish I knew beforehand just to be prepared for those pits and valleys. I went in very much, I kind of went in gangbusters, like, and I would say I was really aggressive about growth at the time, not. And so when COVID hit in 2020, um, I was unprepared for this immediate change of business. So for me, now that I think about it, I would have put away some money, and just be prepared a little, just having more lines of credit, and just having more accessibility to capital so that something like this wouldn't just completely possibly take me out. And so, because I came into it thinking things are going great, I'm invincible, I'm making money. Like, so for me, I just didn't see a rainy day. I think that's just the ever optimistic idea of an entrepreneur. You don't want to think about the rainy day. You're always thinking of opportunities. So now I'm very cautious. I move forward, but also hedging, just being able to understand that there will be rainy days, there will be catastrophes, there will be lawsuits, there'll be those sorts of things. So I have a reserve cash that I don't touch, and lines of credit that I can access really easily and quickly, and developing banking relationships that will support me and know our business. I didn't cultivate those relationships before. And so now I'm very mindful that you need access to capital quickly if anything were to happen. And so now I do think about the importance of banking relationships, putting money away, of having access to capital really quickly for those opportunities. So that's more, just strategic preparation and mindfulness that I didn't necessarily think about as important before.
Are you a growing franchise caught in the real estate trap? You know you need experienced real estate leadership to grow, but you're facing an impossible choice. You either have to hire a full-time director of real estate at $200,000 a year, or risk your brand's future with generic commercial brokers who don't understand the restaurant business, nor do they understand franchising. The cost of getting it wrong is staggering. Check this out. 72% of emerging brands cite real estate delays as their number one challenge, with each delayed opening burning through about $48,000 in lost revenue every single month. Poor locations don't just hurt the profits, they can permanently damage your franchise's reputation. That's where 10rep comes in. We've created a revolutionary solution that gives you senior level real estate expertise at a fraction of the cost for a full-time hire. Our flexible month-to-month model combines deep operational experience, cutting-edge AI, and nationwide network of franchise specialized brokers, all without the burden of salaries, benefits, travel, office expenses, or even long-term contracts. Join successful brands who trust 10rep to turn real estate from a growth challenge into a strategic advantage. Whether you need full service management or project-based support, we scale with you. Don't let real estate hold your franchise back. Visit www.10rep.co to learn how 10rep can help you scale smarter. Yeah, no, that's so key. I mean, I think some people have, their wigs blown back when they finally hear somebody say you need about a year's worth of operating capital to give yourself some breathing room. Because I think they believe that they can just start operating on their, or they assume they're gonna make money, number one. Number two, they think that money is gonna continue to support the business, which is not always the case. So this may be sort of a similar type of question, but I guess anybody who, well, let me ask you this. The first location opened in what year?
2011,
right? So if it's 2011, if you're thinking about yourself to 2011, what's the one foundational move other than having the cash, and the foundational move that you would advise somebody in your position right now?
Yeah. I think, the most important thing you need to do before you start any business, my advice is to take time to understand what is the problem you're trying to solve. What's your business proposition? What is that proposition? Know who you are, what's your point of view,
Hmm.
what how are you going to differentiate yourself in this space? So before you do anything else, because you're not, I mean, you're not gonna, like, you can't go out and raise money if you don't know you don't know what you're saying, you don't know what
Right.
you're doing. Like, so you really have to spend that time understanding what is out in the market right now. If there's a ton of taco stands and Mexican restaurants, like, and you want to do one, like, you got to figure out, what
Yep.
am I going to do? How am I going to serve in a different, compelling way? Am I going to, am I going to open another shop similar to everyone else I see? So understanding your purpose, your vision, your why, what am I doing that's different? I feel like fundamentally you got to answer that question for yourself before you even
Oh yeah.
consider investing, putting any your money, your time, or anyone else's money and time into creating a business, because it's competitive out there. It's tough. And so for you to get into it and jump in the ring, know who you are and know what you're serving, who it is you're serving, right? Spend some time doing that. I think for me, I mean, once I knew what I was doing and what my purpose was, I felt like I could articulate that and bring folks on board that really understood my vision. And we were all able to, because I was so clear in what I was going to do.
Yeah, and it helps define every decision moving forward too, right? Like you're
Right.
not gonna consider, a new beverage or a new
Right.
menu item or a new concept design
Exactly.
element that if it doesn't fit that vision. So
You're
that's
able to tune out the noise, because there's going to be a lot of noise. So if you know who you are and what you're trying to do and what you're presenting, you're able to tune that out really quickly. And people will get it, once you're presenting something that's clear.
that's a great point. I was gonna move on, but talk about the noise for a second. Like what specifically was the noise for you?
Gosh, the noise. I mean, there's so much that you get. It's either the negative noise, like the restaurant business is hard, you have no experience,
Hmm.
the failure rate is high, or your menu is too small, you need to add more, and like you need a bigger menu so that you can appeal to more people, or white people don't know what a bun mi is,
Yeah, right.
or you need to be in San Jose. There's not enough Vietnamese people in San Francisco to eat bun mi. You're in an affluent, mostly predominantly white neighborhood. Like, you're not going to do well. Let's grow you really fast right now. I mean,
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're getting people, and if you get any notoriety, you're going to get people coming in telling you, I can help you do this, I can help you do that, I can do that. So there's just a lot of noise in your journey.
Hmm.
So being able to know, I mean, it sounds so like obvious, but it's hard to do.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
It's an obvious thing, but it's hard to do. But knowing what you want to do, your vision, your purpose, and who you're serving, helps you clear out that noise.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard somebody say that the people who have never done it are going to tell you what not to do, and the people who have done it are just going to ask you questions. How do you do this? How do you plan on doing it? They're not going to try to shoot down your concept or poke holes in your idea. That's, I think, a
Yes.
key identifying factor between who's on your side and who's just kind of trying to say their piece.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
all right, so this segment is quick fire. So quick fire
Okay.
responses. You don't have to give them a whole lot of thought, but just a couple questions that we have here that I think might be beneficial to this group. So most underrated Vietnamese. What's the most underrated part of Vietnamese cuisine that Americans still need to discover?
So underrated. Yes. So we use so many herbs in our cuisine. I mean, we've got basil, mint, we've got kaffir lime, we've got coriander, perilla. There's a one called rau rum, which is, I don't know what the English word is for it,
What
but
is it? Rum rum?
rau rum.
Okay,
It's like,
we'll look
but
it up.
there's so many great herbs in our cuisine that is bursting with flavor. and so unique, and it changes the composition and flavor profile of any dish. So
Oh yeah.
that's really cool and interesting, and it hasn't been tapped into because they're not always easily accessible. So having that, because it brings all these freshness in our
Oh
food
yeah.
that is unique to our food. And also what is underrated is we have great regional cuisine. I know, like, we're just kind of focused on bun mee, pho, kind of the main dishes that are really popular in the US. But if you go to Vietnam and look at cultural food, which I'm sure in many countries it's the same, but the regional, various different regions of Vietnam have very distinct, delicious dishes that I think would kill
Mm.
if done right in the US. And so just other regional dishes that are, you got to go to Vietnam and really have them. And I think in the US, there's still restaurants that serve regional dishes. It's still yet unknown. So some underrated aspects of Vietnamese cooking are still there.
Yeah, and I'm sure
Still
there's.
to be tapped into.
Yeah, I think there's a good percentage of people who listen to the show who have no idea what a lot of this stuff is. So this is going to be interesting. But I will say that as a former chef, people ask me all the time, like, what can I do? What does this need? And it's always, to me, it's always herbs. People don't use enough herbs,
Yes.
and I know that
Yes.
the basil, cilantro, and mint combo
Yeah,
in Vietnamese food is. If you've never had it before, do it tonight on something in a salad, in a
I
soup. It's
know.
astronomical.
And it's so easy to just throw it on.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
you look like a superstar. It's great. How do you plan on protecting the integrity of the brand through franchising? Tough to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning along the way. Like,
Call Aaron. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm learning along the way. But for me, just again, having clear standards, that you provide to your franchisees, having good accountability, having folks to come out and check on what they're doing, being how I see it is just having good foundational training, training systems in place, following up on those systems, checking in, via like constant checking in with our franchisees, either a weekly or bi-weekly basis,
Hmm.
having, checking in on cameras, checking in on social media, checking in
Yeah.
on reviews that you're hearing about the locations and how it's doing, having opportunities for customers and guests to have a 1-800 number. So they're commenting on locations, and we're getting, as a parent company, we're getting those comments directly. So we're not just necessarily hearing it from our franchisees, but also getting the feedback, asking feedback from customers and guests out there in the world operating and visiting our shops, to encourage them to call our 1-800 number to give us feedback. It will allow us to have different ways to make sure that we're consistent and we're having that same experience across the board. That's the best you can do,
Yeah.
and continuing to have opportunities to train and retrain franchisees along the way.
Awesome. Yeah, it's that's really the only way to do it, right? You got to stay involved. That's part of the franchisor's job. Okay, last section we call this the restaurant real estate reality check. So you mentioned you got fortune with some real estate stuff, but what I'm really interested in is the airport locations. How did that airport location opportunity come about, and really what makes it different from just being on the street?
Yeah, yeah. So, I got the idea to get into an airport. It was years ago. Someone from an airport operating at SFO came to my shop, and at the time, I only had two locations in the city. And she came to me. She was eating at my shop, and she loved our food, and we started talking. These are the days when I used to work at the restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
checking in all the time. And we started talking, and she was like, you need to open at an airport. She's like, I love operating at an airport. And she told me I had some street locations like you, but now I'm just at the airport and I love it. And so I was like, wow, okay, let me check this out. And so that's kind of the idea came from that conversation. Airport operations is extremely different from, street side in like every which way possible.
Hmm.
So for us, it's common for brands to come into an airport via licensing deals.
Yep.
So they come in, there's someone else that will operate and they license their brand at an airport, which is the most common way for brands to be at airports across the country. We, on the other hand, decided we're going to just try to go in direct and see how we do. It's not common to come in as a lease, especially a small business direct lease. But so I found out there was an RFP open. I decided, I came in with no experience writing RFPs.
Oh, wow.
I wrote my own RFP.
Wow.
It just, I'm just used to doing things and just figuring this stuff out.
I'm
And
picking up
so
on that. Yeah.
I wrote my own RP. It was, again, just the idea. We don't have anything to lose.
Right.
So I wrote my own RFP. Went up against a lot of big players in the industry, big names, but luckily we won our first spot at Terminal 3 back
Impressive.
in 2017. And I'll tell you, operating at the airport, it's the equivalent of, let's say, opening 3 stores on the street.
Like
right?
volume wise?
In terms of volume wise, 3 to 3.5, maybe 4 stores.
Wow, that's a big piece of information.
In volume wise for us, our experience. But it's much harder. I mean, just imagine everyone on your team needs to have passed security checks. They all need to be screened. Getting product through, like all your vendors need to go through like security checks. All your if you need a plumber, he needs to have a security check. I mean, it's just, and so when you're building a restaurant there, they've all need to have security checks. So you have a small world of vendors, a small world of providers and contractors and things that you can go to.
Yeah.
Which when there's a limited pool, the price goes up. Right.
Oh, for real, yeah.
So everything's much more expensive to operate and work at the airport. Now your hours are longer. So we're 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Which we're not.
Wow.
Right.
Like,
we're not typically
basically 24 hours. Yeah.
Right. That's not our model. Our model is really 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. So the hours are longer. You cannot close. So, once you open, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to just close for these 3 days because
closing for Easter.
We're going to go do an employee appreciation weekend, or we're going to, you can't close. The security is so tight that like something as simple as like if you use a knife, your knife has to be chained to that station. And if it's missing, you're going to get fined.
Think about that. Yeah.
So just thinking about how to operate at an airport is all the security concerns, constant yearly retraining of security on your staff. So it's just more cost, more, I'm dealing with labor unions. So I have, I have unionized employees, which is also another different way to operate. And so there's just understanding that it is a more complex world. It's a unique, complex operational world that you operate under when you're at the airport, that you don't have those restrictions.
No.
Street side.
I mean, you just told me about 6 different things I wasn't aware of. So that's very interesting. So now that you've experienced different types of real estate, what are the lessons that you've learned in that process? There's so many, I run a company that we focus on real estate for franchisees because I feel like startup franchise concepts can't afford to pay a director of real estate, $250,000 plus travel expenses plus benefits, but they need that insight to be able to compete in the market. So what is something that you learned in that process about identifying and securing the right lease in the right location?
Right. I mean, the one thing that, obviously we do all the basic stuff that everyone thinks about, which is, you're getting the information from your broker about the demographics and, traffic counts and all the various things that is pretty obvious to everyone. The one thing that I've learned for us anyway, for our concept is, if you're stuck between 2 options and you're trying to decide between the 2 options and one is, requires you to pay more money because it's just a better location. And one is you pay considerably less money and it's a
Yeah.
slightly less attractive location. Pay them more money.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. For sure.
Pay them. Pay them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've learned that being at, it's obvious, location, location, location. That is first and foremost when it comes to location is your most important decision you can make. So don't balk at the money, right?
Yeah.
So pay the money for the location. It does seem astronomical and it can seem a lot, but it's worth it. We've paid, all our locations are pretty top dollar expensive locations, but they've worked for us.
Hmm.
And so I never veer from that. So I'm always willing to pay more for the top location if it comes down to deciding. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you're tempted to say, hey, I'll just pick this one. It's just right around the corner. People are gonna walk that way. They're gonna see me. They really don't.
Yeah.
So especially for us, for fast casual. If you're a
Yeah.
destination restaurant, that's different. But I think for fast casual, for convenience, for visibility, you just pay top dollar to be at the right place. It's worth it.
Yeah. I mean, rent. I tell people all the time, rent is a function of sales. If you can do $3 million here, that changes what you can pay in rent, right? So that's a great piece of advice as well. Now, if you are, like I said earlier, about somebody who's just kind of stepping into this, maybe looking at their very first location, is there a mistake that you made that you'd want to share with somebody that they don't make that mistake?
Mistake in my first
Real
location.
estate sin.
Yeah, I think I I've learned the hard way that I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but it's more of like I wish that I did this different, right? I mean, the reason I don't say it's a mistake because it ended up working
Yeah.
out, so maybe it's good anyway that we did it. But I spent too much money building out my location.
Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I just um, I think I could have done it cheaper.
Yeah.
I could have gone into second gen locations and saved myself some headache and some money and just sought those locations out. But I'm such a stickler for, I'm almost too much of a perfectionist sometimes, and I want to do it very just I want an empty slate because I want to do it my way, and so
Hmm.
sometimes I need to compromise on that and just think, okay, I can get it can be close to my way myself, 30%, not have it totally my way. So just finding that balance of understanding that you could do it cheaper. So for me, I build a lot of all our restaurants from scratch, and so I'd like to not do that.
You got your fill of that. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. It's expensive these days. So I wanna look at opportunities that I can get into really quickly and open really quickly for the least amount of money it takes. And I'm surprised it's taken me this long. I should have learned this sooner. But here you go.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned this a couple of times and I tell the story quite a bit, but the tropical smoothie sale to Blackstone, $1.8 billion or $2 billion, whatever it was. People were blown away by that. But from my understanding, what was the most attractive part about that for Blackstone was they could put their capital to work because it only took 18 months to make their money back based on the cost of
Yeah.
the build out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like each park their money back and
Yeah.
a year and a half later, they've got it to do something else with. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
dead
So
on with
I'm
that.
I'm I'm so honed in on CapEx costs and
Mm,
just trying to find ways to really reduce that number. Like that's all I care about at this point.
mm,
I feel like I have the model, I figured it out. We've done so much of that work already, our systems, our processes. Now it's just all our attention is on, CapEx. How do we get that number down so that it makes sense?
Yeah, franchisees, future franchisees, if you're listening to that, that is of tremendous value. They probably don't even know yet how valuable that is. So final words to the listeners who are building these mission-driven brands. What do you want the legacy of Bun Mee to be?
When I think of legacy, I think of my son, and I think about the world that that he's growing up in, that's so different from the world that I grew up in, New
Yeah.
Orleans. And now it's like I think about how his experience is so different. He's so proud to be Vietnamese. He's
Yeah.
he doesn't feel like he's less than or he's other. He's
Mm-hmm.
outside just looking in.
Yeah.
He's not pretending to be someone he's not. Very proud to be Vietnamese, and a part of that is a part of that appreciation comes from representation, and representation is represented in either arts, culture, food, seeing it around us. So for me, that representation that I'm providing, as part of this Vietnamese immigrant experience in the U.S. is introducing the food that I love, that I grew up being ashamed of, unfortunately, putting it out in the lexicon of the food understanding in this country, that it becomes accepted, it belongs, and that people love it, and that people appreciate it. It doesn't need to be just in San Jose in the Vietnamese community, that it has a place at San Francisco Airport. It has a place in Minneapolis. It has a place in DC. It has a place there, just like everyone else. And being able to share that food and that culture through food is the legacy that I want to leave for Bun Mee.
Really cool. All right. So where can people sign up on the website if they want to get some more information about franchising? How does that work?
Yeah, so www.bunmee. You'll find everything about us. You'll find information about franchising if you're interested, or just if you want to order some sandwiches. That's where you find us. All our information is there. We have, obviously, our Instagram and social is also on there too. So yeah, definitely check us out. We might be in your town sometime soon.
That's awesome. I hope so. I mean, you guys have some great branding too. The Instagram content is phenomenal. So congratulations on that. And congratulations on where you're at. And congratulations on being named in all these lists. So that's going to be fantastic for you moving forward. And I am going to say now that I think this is going to be one of the most explosive QSR. I think
I hope
you got a
right,
great team.
Kyle.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll be reading about you in restaurant news in a couple of years. So kudos to you. And thanks for taking the time to come on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's
Of
been fun.
course.